The house stood at the end of a narrow street, where most windows went dark by 9. It was a tall building, narrow from the front, stretching back farther than anyone needed. The front door opened to a hallway lined with pale walls and dim lights that hummed slightly when the heating came on. There were 3 floors. The top floor belonged to the man who owned the house. The middle floor was used for storage and meetings. The ground floor held the kitchen, the sitting room, and a door at the very back that opened onto a small enclosed yard. The man who lived there was called Marcus. He was 43. His face was broad and still, with dark eyes that moved slowly when he listened. People who worked for him spoke carefully. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply looked at you until you remembered that he could decide things about your future, and then you stopped talking. He had built a reputation over 15 years through patience and precision. He ran a network that moved goods quietly through the city. Some of those goods were legal, most were not. The police knew his name but could not touch him. His employees feared him, not because of what he had done, but because of what he could choose to do. Marcus lived alone. He had lived alone for 7 years. Before that, a woman had shared the house, but she left one winter and never came back. He did not speak about her. The house had been rearranged since then. Rooms that used to be warm and cluttered were now clean and empty. He kept very little on display. There were no photographs. The furniture was plain. Everything had a place. Every night, Marcus followed the same routine. He ate at 7. He drank 1 glass of whiskey at 8. At 10, he walked through the house, checking the locks. There were 5 doors. The front door, the back door that led to the yard, a side door near the kitchen that opened onto an alley, the door to the basement, and a 5th door at the far end of the ground floor hallway which led to a small room that had once been used for storage. The storage room door was the one Marcus locked last. It had a heavy bolt and a padlock. Every night, without fail, he slid the bolt across, clicked the padlock shut, and tested it twice. He did this even though the room was empty. He did this even though no one else entered the house. He had been doing it for 3 years, ever since a man he trusted told him it was necessary. That man was called Vincent. Vincent had worked for Marcus longer than anyone else. He was quiet, methodical, and never asked questions. He had suggested the nightly routine during a conversation that Marcus could no longer remember clearly. Vincent had said something about security, about making sure the house was contained. Marcus had not questioned it. The advice seemed sound. Vincent was rarely wrong. Vincent came to the house twice a week. He always arrived just before 9 in the evening. He never used the front door. He came through the yard, through the back door, and he always carried a small toolbox. Marcus did not ask what was in the toolbox. Vincent would go down to the basement for 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour, and then leave the same way he came. He never stayed for a drink. He never made conversation. Marcus appreciated that. It was clean, professional. On a Tuesday in late autumn, Marcus began to notice something. The house was colder than usual. The heating worked, but the warmth did not seem to settle. It moved through the rooms and disappeared. He checked the windows. They were sealed. He checked the doors. They were locked. Still, the cold remained. That night, as he locked the storage room door, Marcus paused. He looked at the padlock in his hand and wondered for the first time in 3 years why he was locking an empty room. It was a small thought, barely formed, but it stayed with him as he climbed the stairs to bed. The next morning, he mentioned it to Vincent. Vincent was in the kitchen making tea. He moved slowly as he always did, measuring the water, waiting for the kettle. Marcus leaned against the counter and said, "I've been locking that storage room every night for years. There's nothing in it." Vincent did not look up. He poured the water into the cup and let it sit. "It's not about what's in the room," he said. "It's about routine, discipline. You lock it because you always lock it. That's the point." Marcus nodded. It made sense. He had built his life on discipline. He understood the value of structure. Still, the thought did not leave him. Over the next week, the cold in the house grew worse. Marcus wore a sweater indoors. He turned the heating higher. It made no difference. At night, lying in bed, he could hear the house settling around him. Old wood shifting, pipes ticking. Sounds he had stopped noticing years ago suddenly seemed louder. On Thursday, Vincent arrived as usual. Marcus heard the back door open, heard the soft scrape of the toolbox on the floor. He waited upstairs, listening. Vincent went down to the basement. The house went quiet. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Marcus stood at the top of the stairs looking down into the darkness and felt something he had not felt in a long time. Curiosity. He walked down the stairs slowly. The basement door was open. A faint light came from below. Marcus descended the narrow steps, his hand on the rail. The basement was small, with a low ceiling and concrete walls. It smelled of damp and old metal. Vincent was kneeling in the corner, his back to the stairs, working on something Marcus could not see. "Vincent," he said. Vincent did not turn. He finished what he was doing, closed the toolbox, and stood. When he turned, his face was calm. "You don't usually come down here." "I wanted to see what you were doing." Vincent tilted his head slightly. "Maintenance, same as always." "Maintenance of what?" Vincent looked at him for a long moment. Then he gestured to the corner. There was a metal panel set into the wall about 2 feet square. It was held in place with bolts. Marcus had never noticed it before. "What is that?" Marcus asked. "Access panel," Vincent said, "for the pipes. The old heating system runs through here. I check it every week, make sure nothing's leaking." Marcus walked closer. He looked at the panel. It was old, covered in a thin layer of rust. The bolts looked tight. "The heating's been running cold," Marcus said. "Could it be a problem here?"
"I don't think so," Vincent said, "but I'll check more carefully next time." Marcus nodded. He looked around the basement. There was nothing else, just bare walls, a few empty shelves, and the panel. He felt foolish for coming down. "All right," he said. "Thank you." Vincent picked up the toolbox and walked past him, up the stairs. Marcus stayed in the basement for a moment longer, looking at the panel. Then he followed. That night, as Marcus locked the storage room door, he found himself thinking about the basement, about the panel, about Vincent kneeling in the corner, always with his back turned. He slid the bolt across, clicked the padlock shut, and tested it twice. The routine felt different now. It felt deliberate in a way it had not felt before. On Saturday, Marcus decided not to lock the storage room door. It was a small decision, almost thoughtless. He stood in the hallway, looking at the door, and simply chose not to do it. He locked the other 4 doors as usual, then went upstairs to bed. The house felt different that night. Marcus lay awake, listening. The sounds were the same, but they seemed closer. The ticking of the pipes, the creak of the floorboards. At some point, he thought he heard a faint scraping sound, like metal on metal, but when he held his breath and listened, there was nothing. In the morning, the storage room door was still unlocked. Marcus opened it and looked inside. The room was exactly as it had always been. Empty. 4 walls, a bare floor, a single light fixture hanging from the ceiling. He closed the door and went about his day. Vincent arrived on Tuesday, as usual. He came through the back door, carrying the toolbox. Marcus was in the kitchen. He watched Vincent walk past without speaking. Vincent went down to the basement. Marcus waited 5 minutes, then followed. This time, Vincent heard him coming. When Marcus reached the bottom of the stairs, Vincent was standing, the toolbox at his feet. "You're checking on me now?" Vincent said. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. Not anger, something closer to concern. "I'm curious," Marcus said. "You've been coming here for years. I've never asked what you do. I'm asking now." Vincent looked at him for a long time. Then he knelt, opened the toolbox, and took out a wrench. He turned to the panel on the wall and began loosening one of the bolts. "I told you," Vincent said. "Maintenance." "Show me." Vincent paused. His hand rested on the wrench. He did not look at Marcus. "You don't need to see," he said. "You just need to trust me." "I do trust you. That's why I'm asking." Vincent set the wrench down. He stood and turned to face Marcus. His expression was difficult to read. "The panel opens onto a shaft. It runs up through the walls of the house, old ventilation system. It's not used anymore, but it's still there. Sometimes things get in. Rats, birds. I make sure it stays sealed." Marcus looked at the panel. "Open it." Vincent shook his head. "There's no need." "Open it." Vincent did not move. The basement was very quiet. Then he bent down, picked up the wrench, and began unscrewing the bolts. It took several minutes. When the last bolt came free, he set the panel aside carefully. Behind it was darkness, a narrow shaft, maybe 2 feet wide, disappearing up into the walls. Marcus leaned closer. He could smell old brick and stale air. "What's up there?" "Nothing," Vincent said. "That's the point. I keep it empty." Marcus looked at him. "By doing what?" Vincent did not answer. He picked up the panel and began screwing it back into place. Marcus watched him work. When the panel was secure, he stood and faced him again. "You need to keep locking that storage room door," he said. "Why?" "Because it's part of the routine, because the house works when you follow the routine. You've been safe here for years. Don't change things now." Marcus felt something shift inside him. It was not fear, it was closer to irritation. "I don't need you to tell me how to run my house," he said. Vincent nodded slowly. "I know," he said, "but I'm telling you anyway." He picked up the toolbox and walked past Marcus up the stairs. Marcus stayed in the basement, looking at the panel. Then he turned and left. That night, Marcus did not lock the storage room door. He stood in the hallway, staring at it, and made a conscious choice. He locked the other 4 doors, climbed the stairs, and went to bed. He woke in the middle of the night to a sound. It was faint, rhythmic, a tapping. He lay still, listening. It seemed to come from inside the walls. He got out of bed and walked through the house, checking each room. The tapping stopped. He returned to bed. In the morning, he found a crack in the plaster near the storage room door. It was thin, barely visible, running from the floor up to the ceiling. He touched it with his finger. The plaster felt brittle. Vincent did not come that week. He called Vincent on Thursday evening. Vincent answered on the 3rd ring. "I didn't come," Marcus said. "I thought you didn't want me there." "I never said that." There was a pause. "You stopped locking the door," Vincent said. "That tells me something." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter. "It's just a door." "No," Vincent quietly said. "It's not." "Then tell me what it is." Vincent was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was tired. "You ever think about why the house is built the way it is? 3 floors, all those rooms, that shaft running through the walls, the storage room at the end of the hallway, right over the basement. It's not random. The house was designed with a purpose." "What purpose?" "Containment. The people who built it, a long time ago, they understood something about space, about boundaries. The storage room door isn't just a door, it's a seal. When you lock it, you're keeping the house in balance. When you leave it open, things shift." Marcus laughed. It was a short, dry sound. "You're telling me the house is haunted?" "I'm telling you the house has structure," Vincent said, "and you're breaking it." Marcus hung up. That night, he left the storage room door open. He did it deliberately, standing in the hallway, looking at the dark space beyond. Then he went upstairs. He woke at 2 in the morning. The tapping was louder. It moved through the walls, up from the basement, circling the ground floor, climbing towards the 2nd floor. Marcus sat up in bed, listening. The sound stopped outside his door. He waited. Silence. He got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The tapping started again, lower now, back on the ground floor. He walked down the stairs, following the sound. It led him to the storage room. The door was still open. The room was dark.
Marcus stepped inside. The tapping stopped. He stood in the center of the room looking around. The walls were bare, the floor was bare. There was nothing here. He turned to leave and saw that the crack in the hallway plaster had grown. It was wider now, deep enough to see the brick behind. He went back to bed but did not sleep. In the morning, he called a builder. A young man arrived in the afternoon with a toolbox and a friendly smile. Marcus showed him the crack. The builder examined it, running his hand along the plaster. "Old house," the builder said. "They settle. This is pretty common. Can you fix it?" "Sure, I'll patch it up. Shouldn't take long." The builder worked for an hour, filling the crack, smoothing the surface. When he finished, the wall looked clean. The builder packed his tools and left. Marcus paid him and closed the door. That night, the crack reappeared, longer this time, deeper. It ran from the storage room door all the way to the front door, a jagged line splitting the hallway in two. Marcus stood in the hallway, staring at it. Then he walked to the storage room, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him. He slid the bolt across. He clicked the padlock shut. He tested it twice. The house went quiet. Marcus returned to the hallway. The crack was still there, but it had stopped growing. He touched it with his hand. The plaster was cold. He called Vincent. Vincent answered immediately. "I locked it," Marcus said. "Good. The crack's still there." "It'll heal," Vincent said. "Give it time." "What is this?" Marcus asked. "What's happening?" Vincent sighed. "You broke the routine. The house noticed. Now you have to rebuild it. Lock the door every night. Same time, same way. Don't miss a night. Don't think about it. Just do it." "For how long?" "As long as you live here." Marcus looked at the crack. "And if I don't?" Vincent did not answer. The line went dead. Marcus locked the storage room door every night for the next 2 weeks. The crack began to fade. It did not disappear, but it shrank, became thinner, until it was barely visible. The tapping stopped. The cold eased. The house settled back into itself. Vincent returned on a Thursday evening. He came through the back door, carrying the toolbox. Marcus was waiting in the kitchen. "Thank you," Marcus said. Vincent nodded. He set the toolbox down and looked at Marcus. "You understand now?" "I think so." "Good. Don't forget again." Vincent went down to the basement. Marcus did not follow. He sat in the kitchen, listening to the faint sounds of work below. When Vincent finished, he came back up, picked up the toolbox, and left through the back door without speaking. Marcus walked to the storage room. He looked at the door. The bolt was across. The padlock was shut. He reached out and tested it twice. It held. That night, Marcus lay in bed and thought about the house, about the shaft in the walls, about the storage room, about Vincent kneeling in the basement, always with his back turned. He thought about the woman who had left 7 years ago, and whether she had known something he had not. He thought about the routine and how easily he had fallen back into it. He wondered if he was a prisoner or a keeper. The question did not have an answer. Winter came. The house stayed warm. The crack faded until it was only a faint line, something you would not notice unless you were looking for it. Marcus locked the storage room door every night at 10. He never missed. He never thought about it. Vincent continued to visit twice a week. He came through the back door, went down to the basement, worked for 30 minutes, and left. They did not speak. The routine held. On a cold evening in January, Marcus received a phone call. It was a man he did not know calling from a hospital. Vincent had collapsed at home. A stroke. He was stable but would not be working for a long time. Marcus thanked the man and hung up. He sat in the kitchen, looking at the clock. It was 8:30. Vincent would have arrived in half an hour. Marcus waited, but no one came. The next day, Marcus went down to the basement. He stood in front of the metal panel, looking at the bolts. He did not have a wrench. He went upstairs, found a toolbox in the storage closet, and brought it down. He loosened the bolts slowly, carefully, the way he had seen Vincent do it. When the panel came free, he set it aside and looked into the shaft. It was dark. He could not see the top. He leaned closer, listening. There was a faint sound, like breathing or wind moving through a narrow space. He reached inside. His hand touched something cold and smooth. Metal. He pulled back. He put the panel back in place and tightened the bolts. Then he went upstairs and locked the storage room door. That night, the tapping returned. It was soft at first, barely audible, but it grew louder as the hours passed. Marcus lay in bed, listening. It moved through the walls, up from the basement, circling the ground floor. It stopped outside the storage room. Marcus got up and walked down the stairs. He stood in the hallway looking at the door. The bolt was across, the padlock was shut. He tested it twice. It held. The tapping continued. It was not coming from the storage room. It was coming from inside the walls. Marcus walked to the basement. He descended the stairs and stood in front of the panel. The tapping was louder here. It seemed to come from the shaft itself, a steady rhythm, like something trying to push through. He tightened the bolts. The tapping did not stop. He went back upstairs. He sat in the kitchen and waited. The tapping continued until dawn. When the sun came up, it stopped. Marcus did not sleep that night, or the next. The tapping returned every evening, always at the same time, always the same rhythm. He called Vincent's number. No answer. He called the hospital. They told him Vincent was recovering but could not take visitors. The third night, Marcus stood in the hallway and made a decision. He unlocked the storage room door. He opened it and stepped inside. The room was empty, as it had always been. He looked at the walls, the floor, the ceiling. There was nothing. He closed the door and locked it again. The tapping stopped. Marcus sat on the floor in the hallway, his back against the wall. He understood now. The routine was not about the storage room. It was not about the shaft, or the panel, or Vincent. It was about him. It was about making a choice every night to maintain something, even when he did not understand it. The house did not care what he believed. It only cared what he did. He stood and walked to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and drank it slowly. Then he locked the 4 doors, walked to the storage room, slid the bolt across, clicked the padlock shut, and tested it twice. The house settled. The cold eased. The walls went quiet. Vincent never returned to the house. Marcus never saw him again. He heard, months later, that Vincent had moved to another city, somewhere quiet, away from the work. Marcus did not try to contact him. He continued the routine. Every night, without fail. The storage room door was locked at 10. The house remained balanced. The crack in the hallway faded until it was invisible. Years passed. Marcus grew older. His hair turned gray. The network he had built began to shrink. Younger men took over the work. Marcus stepped back, slowly, quietly. He no longer gave orders. He no longer made decisions. He simply lived in the house, following the routine. On a warm evening in late spring, Marcus stood in the hallway, looking at the storage room door. He was 62. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the bolt. He slid it across, clicked the padlock shut, and tested it twice. He thought about the woman who had left all those years ago. He thought about Vincent, kneeling in the basement, always with his back turned. He thought about the shaft in the walls, and what might live there, waiting. He thought about the choice he made every night, and whether it was discipline or fear. The house did not answer. It never did. It simply waited, as it had always waited, for him to lock the door. Marcus climbed the stairs to bed. The house was quiet. The walls held. The routine continued. And every night, in the dark, something listened.